when the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell himself, was asked what the benefit of 2% inflation is, for instance, his answer was somewhere between vague and nonsensical.
For those working families of people, why 2%?
That has become the globally agreed, essentially all major central banks target 2% inflation in one form or another.
How does that help my Nevada families? How does that help people in Nevada?
I'll tell you how it does. And it's I guess it's obviously not, it's not obvious how that is, but to have people...
This person was elected? Who is this guy?
People believe that inflation is going to go back to 2%. Really?
Oh, he's not elected. He's just some pundit for the cartel or something, like, you know, like the banking card. And he has no clue. Do you see what I'm saying? He a puppet, bro. He's only told basic knowledge, bro. He ain't told nothing that needs to be told to him.
Anchors inflation there, because, you know, the evidence is and the modern belief is that people's expectations about inflation actually have an effect on inflation. If you expect inflation to go up 5%, then it will.
Bro, what? What?
It's obviously not, it's not obvious how that is, but to have people believe that inflation is going to go back to 2% really anchors inflation there, because, you know, the evidence is and the modern belief is that people's expectations about inflation actually have an effect on inflation. If you expect inflation to go up 5%, then it will.
Economist Steve Hanke of Johns Hopkins University has a...
Bro, the way he said that was so... incoherent.
History of predicting inflation accurately simply by watching the expansion of the money supply via printing. Here's what he had to say about Fed Chair Jerome Powell's take on inflation.
The chairman does not understand, even at this point, what the causes of inflation are. He has failed to tell us that inflation is always caused by excess growth in the money supply, turning the printing presses on.
Griffin, however, argues that Powell isn't confused. The pretense of confusion is intentional. The system depends on complexity, on jargon, on abstraction so dense the architects of the system can easily dodge questions. As they say, if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, bamboozle them with bullshit.
Right. Imagine this, right? Like, I learned a statistic, right, that when you're public speaking, right, say you're public speaking, right, to 10,000 people, while you're talking, right, did you know that the majority of that 10,000 people that are watching you aren't paying attention to what you're saying, actually? 80% of it is they're paying attention to how and intent you're saying your things. And so that way, if they want to get a convicted response out of you, they're going to be like, hey, gung-ho, patriotism. They're going to lash out with words that are designed to create an emotional response. And so therefore, you are no longer paying attention really to what they are saying.
According to Griffin, this is because if the people who understood the system explained it plainly, people...
How do you think Hitler got elected?
...would revolt. That's why this guy was an economic advisor to President Biden.
Well,
In fairness, I think that guy is legitimately confused, but when confusion helps your cause, you are in trouble. The powers of...
Anytime you do anytime you say the word that word means confusion. That means in your brain, you are having a moment where you don't know where you're going with whatever you were doing. You like hit a bump in the road. Do you see what I'm saying? And instead of saying that word, you should just pause and stay silent and recognize that you're in a bump in the road and that you need to work it out. And using the word actually dumbs your ability down to further get yourself out of those potential bumps in the road in your brain when you're attempting to communicate information to other people. I don't know if you've noticed or how long you might have been watching me right now. Just comprehend how many times have I actually used the word and I'm pretty certain anytime I have used the word I have corrected myself by saying I'm confused.
We want people to tune out and just get on with their lives. That's the system working exactly as intended. Here's a question nobody asks. If the system is this broken, why don't more people see it? Because the greatest trick the creature ever pulled wasn't economic, it was psychological. It didn't just steal your money, it stole your frame of reference, your ability to even conceive of what's actually happening.
And that actually happened long ago. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, we're in just the newest iteration of it. Do you see what I'm saying? What he's talking about is very old. So, like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is what I'm talking about, bro. Oh my goodness. See how he's talking about, like, how everybody's been lulled and tricked psychologically. He has to admit that in of itself, even he was tricked by this, or he wouldn't have been able to grow such a large YouTube channel, right? Yet even in that, he can't conceive that I'm saying that it is far older than this thing that he's talking about, and that the manipulation of the mind psychologically has happened because of language. And so the dawn of language, it was the dawn of when everyone began being psychologically manipulated, not the Federal Reserve.
Griffin argues that the Fed doesn't just control currency, it controls the story. And once they control the story, they don't need force. They just need you to believe or ignore. So they engineer ignorance, and they do it at scale through education, media, and the manufacturing of public perception. Griffin outlines how the Federal Reserve has carefully shaped the public's understanding of economics from the classroom up.
Like, do you see what I'm saying? Essentially, Tom is basically going over for you, like, the symptoms of diagnosis, like that's the cause of the diagnosis. The symptoms come from whatever is diagnosed. The symptoms are not the diagnosis. Do you see what I'm saying? The symptoms are to find the root cause. Most people do not have the ability to do a root cause analysis on anything.
Through partnerships with universities, grants to economics departments, and curriculum influenced by aligned institutions, the central bank's worldview becomes orthodoxy. Students aren't taught to question the insanity of inflation, they're taught to revere it. I, for one, believed, until not that long ago.
See what I'm saying? He just admitted what I just said I already knew about him, and I'm telling you, I have not watched this part. I didn't know he was going to say that right now. I just described that he is still stuck within the system, and he just figured out this about the Fed not too long ago.
That inflation was like a law of nature.
I can logistically tell you where you are in the story, right? So, like, I can tell you how much, like, based on what you tell me, I will be able to tell you where you're at in the level of knowing what is actually going on versus what's not going on.
No idea that it was man-made. Why wouldn't I? Or anyone else for that matter.
A lot of people actually did. It's actually being told to us every single day. See, these are the things that he's leaving out. Is why wouldn't they? Comprehend the system that he's talking about has to tell you what it's doing to you because you have free will and excuse me. Free will cannot be taken from you. Like, it can't. The reason why it seems like free will might have been taken from you is because you were brainwashed to take the free will from yourself. The system didn't need to take the free will from you. It got you to take the free will from you. Do you see how that works? It's all you that did it to you. And that's how the system has manipulated everything. And that's why it's so difficult to get someone to compute that they are stuck in the brainwashing and the mental false reality.
Journalists often rely on Fed insiders for guidance and access. Critical voices are marginal.
Like, comprehend, I can try to talk to this guy about every single point that I've made about him. He's probably never going to see this reaction that I put on YouTube. And so therefore, essentially, there is no ability to help him get better at helping other people because he's attempting to help other people by spreading the word about the Fed. And that is a good thing. just he in of it is also still persisting the overall root cause of why everybody's stuck in the first place. And so therefore he's not really helping anyone because they're trained to hear what he's saying in a very certain way. So that way, even when he tells people, they're not going to get all pissed off. They've already been pacified for this type of information. And that's why I'm telling you about language manipulation, because you're not pacified for it. Every person I've told about language manipulation gets thoroughly upset at me. They get very mad. Like they retort back with high levels of ignorant jargon fueled with hate and anger. This emotional response lets me know how attached you are to said system of brainwashing and language manipulation. And so how do I help this guy who is on a good path of attempting to help, but won't hear what I'm saying because he's too far above to hear the little noise I'm making down here at the bottom of the crab bucket?
Marginalized, and the Fed press releases are treated.
I am growing though. 180. Oh, I went down. I was at 184 today. Now I'm back to 182. That's cool. Like, I'm not worried about the overall numbers, bro. I still win because even if I reach one being, it doesn't matter. And I already have actually multiple times. So I'm not worried about any numbers statistically. I don't even really like pay attention. That's why I just recognized. I was like, oh shit. Well, like I don't even know if that number is actually real, bro, because Facebook is part of this system, bro, and I'm attempting to speak through the system to speak to you.
Like gospel. Hopefully, the Biden cognitive cover-up is showing people just how actively the media works to lock people into a false narrative when they have an agenda. The public narrative around interest rates, inflations, and market stability is set by the very people pulling the levers. Even history is ripe for manipulation.
I don't know, bro. The stuff I'm getting into with on that level of like politics is like they have masks, bro, that people can put on that look so real that you like logistically can't tell that it's a mask. Like that's how good masks like have gotten. Right? And so it's speculatory that Biden isn't even Biden and that there's someone that acting as Biden. And I don't know why anyone would need to have all this, have like someone act as someone else, unless that one was dead already. Right? And then so therefore they just need that one to make appearances, right? I don't know. That's my theory though.
As Griffin explains, it is constantly being rewritten to support the legitimacy of the current system. The cause of economic crashes are sanitized, the architects of collapse are framed as saviors, the real drivers, central banks, global financiers, colluding politicians, are almost never discussed in mainstream history books. It's not that the truth is even that hidden, it's that it's never taught. One of Griffin's most unsaid...
It's never been hidden. It's on the tip of everybody's nose. This is where they want to set the truth. And so you're out here looking at all this shit, right? Blah, 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 computer, screen, cup, blah, blah, blah. And the truth sits right here. And you're like, hey, look at that cup. Look at that microphone. Look at that screen. Da, 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 da. Look at all that shit. Look at all this crazy stuff. When the whole time the truth is sitting right here, bro. That's a metaphor. That's a metaphor for saying the truth is inside of you.
Settling claims is that the system creates its own opposition through false flags. By funding and promoting critics who stay within certain boundaries, the illusion of debate is maintained, but the fundamentals are never questioned. Central banking is never on the table. Griffin argues this controlled dissent makes the system appear open while actually strictly reinforcing its boundaries. According to Griffin, fiat currency is not just a tool of commerce, it's a weapon of control. Price volatility creates anxiety, and fear makes people compliant, so inflation erodes your savings invisibly. The system steals your time and labor,
Invest
and
in Bitcoin.
slowly but surely the frog is boiled. You don't have to jail a population to get them to comply if they're too afraid and too confused and too misinformed to act.
And
The harsh
completely
reality
divided by like
is that
race,
central banks,
religion.
like the Fed, encourage
and a whole bunch
move
of other
towards
environmental,
totalitarianism.
cultural,
Griffin points to historical
like,
examples such as
things.
Nazi Germany and even 9/11, where fear and the subsequent massive expansion of the money supply made increased governmental control not just possible, but desirable. The surveillance state made possible by the Patriot Act is a scandal from where I'm sitting, but here we are. And I trust, I don't need to explain, that Germany's attempt to meet the onerous demands of the Treaty of Versailles through money printing was a disaster. Given that it led to hyperinflation and the rise of Hitler, I hope we can all agree it was a terrible fucking idea, despite the desperate situation that they were in.
Agreed.
The pattern is predictable. A boom, a bust, a panic, then calls for control. Control of prices, control of wages, control of dissent. The centralization of power requires...
Watch, I'm going to blow your mind right now. If the rate of minimum wage went up with the rate of production, what would if the rate of minimum wage gotta make sure I write the sentence right. Went up with the rate of production, what would the minimum wage be today? Watch this. Watch what happens. Watch what the chat GPT AI tells me. And you're gonna be mind blown. In short, had minimum wage kept pace with the typical workers produce an hour instead of simply being indexed to inflation or left unchanged, today's federal minimum wage would be roughly $25 instead of $7.25. Think about that. This is just the federal minimum wage, right? So what about non-federal? That was crazy. I was actually looking for this number that it's about to tell me. I wasn't looking for the federal number, but that's a crazy number. So technically, the federal minimum wage should be $25, not $7.25. They just kept it the same. So think of it this way, right? Boom. Look, federal baseline, $18.25. Look, California, $42. Look at this. I live in Colorado. The minimum wage, average minimum wage is $14.81. It should be $38.51 an hour. New York, $40.30. Washington D.C., $45.50 instead of $17.50. West Virginia, $22.75. Like, do you see what I mean? In other words, the highest, like, look, 15 to 18, whereas PEGS 4 would lie in the $35 to $50 range, depending on jurisdiction, nominal rating, not normal, nominal. Like, so you see how fucked out of money you've been your whole life.
The centralization of money. Under a central bank, monetary policy can be used for the purposes of social engineering.
What I just showed you means you have to produce more with getting less.
Fed manipulates interest rates. It's not just tweaking the economy, it's redirecting human behavior. Cheap credit inflates housing bubbles, stock bubbles, as well as encouraging consumer debt and rampant speculative gambling on any and every financial instrument that can be found, from NFTs and shitcoins to Beanie Babies and the Japanese yen carry trade. Griffin argues that human nature is to pursue speculative mania, and that central banks exasperate this
And see, that's where Griffin is kind of wrong, because he's coming from at this being in the system that I'm talking about everyone is in, which is fueled with with manipulation of language.
innate tendency. The example he gives is the Dutch tulip mania. As Griffin documents, tulip mania was a speculative frenzy that swept through the Netherlands in the 1630s, driving prices of tulip bulbs, of all things, to astronomical heights far beyond their intrinsic value. Ordinary citizens, merchants, and investors became gripped by greed.
So comprehend that what I'm talking about and what he's talking about with the Fed, it's been going on longer than the United States has even existed.
Betting fortunes on flowers they believed would endlessly appreciate. Nothing ever does. So inevitably, the illusion collapsed overnight as
You can't say nothing ever does anymore because logistically Bitcoin only has 21 million and it will be done being mined in 2140 no matter what. There will never be another Bitcoin or a Satoshi mined after 2140. And it's only going to continue to appreciate because why do you think I'm reacting to this video? Because Bitcoin is only going to continue to appreciate in value and there's a fixed number. And the system we live in has to keep creating money. It has to keep printing money to self-sustain itself. And there is no other way to sustain it because the money is printed out of thin air and there is not technically enough like money in the world to pay back the interest on the money that you owe. Like altogether. Do you see what I mean? Like there's not enough. Like there's more interest money that you have to pay back then there is money always because it started as nothing and then given away with interest. And so when they gave it away, what the one has to pay back is the principal, what they took, and the extra money that doesn't exist because it requires you to print more money to get that money back.
Buyers vanished and prices plunged, leaving speculators bankrupt and exposing the eternal truth that irrational exuberance disconnected from real value can bloom spectacularly, but always fades just as quickly. The critical difference is that a central bank magnifies and institutionalizes these speculative tendencies
Why do you say
by
it like
injecting
magnified
artificially cheap credit and manipulating interest rates, thereby amplifying both the size and consequences of speculative bubbles. To illustrate how long this psychological playbook has been in use, Griffin invokes one of the most famous banking dynasties in history, the Rothschilds. He recounts the tale of Nathan Rothschild at Waterloo, who used early intelligence of Napoleon's defeat to manipulate the British stock market, selling in panic, buying at the bottom, and walking away with control of vast national assets. Griffin isn't trying to make this.
He was a fucking liar. See how liars have manipulated the entire fucking world with their lies.
This about one family. He's showing the blueprint. Use information asymmetry, control media, move markets, consolidate power. Now, admittedly, after reading Neil Ferguson's book, The House of Rothschild, I have a feeling Griffin again spills into conspiracy theory here. The story is...
See how he legitimizes conspiracy theory and that whole terminology and the whole, and the whole definition and the whole concept of conspiracy theory. That whole thing was coined by the government he's talking about that is in control through the Fed and the banking cartel. It's all one giant ring. So do you see how he's still defending one part of the whole overall cartel while trying to expose? Do you see how it doesn't work, bro? Like it doesn't, if you're exposing this arm and the other arm is smacking you in the back of the head and then you turn around and you start to expose that arm and then another arm smacks you in the back of the head and you're like, oh, and you never look at the body of where the arms are coming from. This is what you get when someone's talking about information, like, which is good. He's done a great job of explaining the Fed. He's just also completely enamored still by the system while doing it.
As Griffin retells it and has become quite popular, is almost...
There is no such thing as a conspiracy theory. Either these people are doing fucked up shit or they're not doing fucked up shit. It's as simple as that. The whole like I said, the whole terminology was created to do what it's doing with how he's speaking about it. How he's like going, oh, I can't trust certain information because my brain has been told that this specific type of information is considered conspiracy theoritorial, and so therefore I should not give it any grain of salt or take anything from it or listen to it really at all. That was all designed by the government so that way you don't look at certain information, so you don't figure out certain things. So while he looked into this highly in depth about the Federal Reserve, knows how even in this research he stayed away from certain information because of what he just said, which was created by the government for him to do that, so that way he doesn't actually figure out the complete truth of it.
certainly a mix of fact and legend, leaning heavily towards being fully apocryphal. If Ferguson can be believed, the real story probably went something more like this. Nathan Rothschild did receive the news of Napoleon's defeat slightly ahead of everyone else, but historical records suggest he informed the government immediately and then engaged in his financial maneuvers. The really apocryphal part is that the more dramatic retelling of the story is that he deliberately sparked a panic to crash the market so he could buy assets at rock bottom. This version, popularized in the 19th century, often carries anti-Semitic undertones and was amplified by critics of the Rothschild family's influence.
Anti-Semitic is a special term for racism for one race, and that makes it racist. Did you hear what I said? To say someone is being anti-Semitic against a race, and any form of racism is bad, then there is no need for a special term to speak about racism against a race. Right? Right. Therefore, to force every other race to adhere to that race having a special word that is used, if you say anything bad about that race whatsoever, this word is used immensely and profusely, is thrown in your face. That in of itself is racist, because I have the right to criticize you and what you're doing, and your race has nothing to do with whether or not you're doing something good or bad in any content or intentional means. So if, say, Jews, not the race, or excuse me, not the race, the religion, right, is a guise, right, for Zionism, which is not Jewish people, the race. They are outside of that constituent, and they use Judaism as a subversion to get you to trust them. And then those group of people are with the banking cartel that created the Fed. Then they are all in unison together, yet you can't speak out about the Zionists because they are Jewish, the religion, and they are backed by the race of Jewish people as anti-Semitic, so you can't speak about them because you would be anti-Semitic. So do you see how the word and term in of itself is designed to keep you from talking about people that could be doing horrendous shit to the planet and the world? Excuse me, plane, not planet.
Evidence presented in books like The House of Rothschild show no clear proof of such a scheme. Rothschild did trade heavily in government bonds and likely profited from the market's recovery post-Waterloo, but the idea of a calculated panic lacks primary source backing, and honestly, the economy is probably too complicated for that sort of precise maneuvering.
So do you see how, again, he like retreats now? Now he's going, oh, the Federal Reserve could create a stock market crash through inflation and then deflation. Yet, before the Federal Reserve, it's highly not plausible that this is taking place already. The cognitive dissonance, bro.
Stock exchange records from that time also don't show a dramatic crash consistent with the story. There's no doubt Nathan Rothschild wealth grew, but it seems to be from long-term bond dealings and his role in financing the British war effort rather than a single manipulative coup. For my money, though, honestly, the Rothschild remain a meaningful...
Like, I don't think he even fully comprehends why Nathan Rothschild did that. It had to do with consolidating the banking industry. Do you see what I'm saying? He at the crash designed it for him to buy up other banks, creating less competition in the banking world. Not to mention that the reason why the Titanic sunk was to get rid of some competition in the banking world.
part of the story, as you can see echoes of their strategy of funding both sides of a conflict in the willingness of the US government to sell weapons to just about anyone, including people who have become our enemies and killed our own soldiers with US-made weapons. And yet, again, we fail to stand up. There's just too much complexity, too much narrative control, too much fear, too much greed, and too little understanding of how the system is actually rigged against us.
So in conclusion, what do we do now? Now that you see it,
Research language manipulation, because it's the only way you're going to be able to get out of the brainwashing. Because if you cannot consider or even think that it's possible that the language you've been speaking your whole life is actually designed to keep you trapped in a false mental state, so that way you are not seeing what the fuck is happening to you.